Welcome to another super fast tutorial. In this particular tutorial, we'll be trying to create this type of a logo intro animation, and you can use this cinematic move for not just text but any SVG logo as well. Although in this particular video, we'll just be dealing with the text. So without any further ado, let's get started. Open up a new default scene, and as usual, delete the default cube. Let's add in a text and then change the text to whatever you want it to be. So in this case, since this is Dayan Studios, let's write down Dayan Studios. All right, so the next thing that you have to do is go to the text property in this panel over here, and then change the alignment to center and even the vertical alignment to center. Next, in the geometry, let's extrude it a bit. And then we also have to change the font. So let's go to font and then open any font you want from the Windows font section. Now you can choose this particular option so that you can actually get a preview of the fonts to see which font suits best. So I don't have any preferences for the fonts right now. Let's just go with this one for now and maybe switch it actually. Let's use copper plate. So this is what I generally use, although it's not that great of a font, but this will do for now. So we have to add in a camera next, or since we already have a camera, let's just make the changings to the position of the camera accordingly. Select the camera and then place the location X0, Y0, rotation 0, 0, 0. And then just move it back on the Z-axis till the entire logo is fit in. So this is where our final logo is going to be. So now let's start off with all of the materials to the logos. Let's first go into rendered view, change the world, put it close to black. Let's see where this light is, and then let's grab it and move the light around. And all right, let's take the light, let's move it on the Z-axis, Z, and just bring it down. So this is going to give a nice cinematic rim lighting look. To increase this rim light, let's select the text. In the geometry, under bevel, make sure that we increase the bevel by just a bit at least. So that will increase the rim lighting that you have at the back. So now what we could do is we could take this particular light and have it move from the left to the right along the animation. So let's figure out how long we want the animation to be. So if it's maybe an 8-second animation, if we render it at 30 frames per second, we would have to do 30 into 8, 240 frames. Let's change the speed of animation or the frame rate from 24 frames to 30 frames per second. Now at frame number 1, let's move the light over here all the way out of the light. Hit I to insert a location keyframe, and then go all the way to frame 240, and then just grab it along the X, move it all the way till here, and hit I location. So there we have the animation for the light, or at least the rim light that goes. This gives the cinematic vibes to it. Let's change the color of the light to our Dayan Studio colors, which is this turquoise color over here. Let's increase the power from 1000 to maybe 10,000. All right. Let's switch on bloom, ambient occlusion, as well as screen space reflections. Of course, the bloom, I always like to clamp it down at 4, and that should be fine. So this gives us a really nice cinematic light moving through the scene type of feel. Of course, we're also going to animate the camera, the letters, and all of that. So let's start doing that. First up, these letters, let's animate the distance. Let's have them all come together. So let's go here. Let's go to the character spacing down here and just increase this to 10. All right, hit I to get a keyframe, and then go to frame maybe, since it's 240, let's go to 140, and then reduce the character spacing all the way to 1, or maybe 1.1. It looks a bit better. So let's go and hit I. So this is the first animation that's happening over here. Okay. Of course, playback. Let's from play every frame, let's go to frame dropping so that we know the actual speed that it's going to look at. It'll just be a little smoother. It's right now going at only 11 frames per second. So all right, although that looks good, I think I would want that to speed up just a bit. So let's move this down to 110. And there you go. So while this happens, let's have the camera also move into position. So let's add in a new empty over here, which will be the camera control. So let's select the camera, then select the empty and hit Control P to set the empty as the parent. So now if I scale the empty, the camera scales along with it, and then hit I on location, rotation, and scale. Maybe move this to 150. Now let's go to 0, and then, or let's just stay here, rotate it on the X 90 degrees so that we know where we are, scale it down so that we can see what the approximate size of these objects are, and then hit I, location, rotation, scale, take this, shift it all the way to frame number 1. Then let's actually go to frame number 1 and just grab it on the X till we can actually see something. So let's keep it there and then hit I, location, rotation, scale. So now that's the animation that we're seeing. All right, it looks good enough to me. Let's take the camera, go to viewport display and change the passport out to 1. That way you can't see anything that's outside the camera, and it just helps focus everything in quite a bit. Amazing. So now that we have that in place, the entire front is completely unseen. So we have to add in some type of lights. So let's add in a few area lights. So let's take a light, let's add in an area light. Let's just GZ. So that's there, probably around here. Let's scale it on the X-axis and then rotate it on the Z-axis to get some 45 degrees. Let's increase the power to maybe 1000. Okay, maybe 100. All right, that should do. Let's just grab it on the X. And now let's Alt-D to create a linked copy so that when we change the colors, all of them change. And then move that on the X-axis by a bit. Okay, let's Alt-D again on the X and move it there. Anyway, now that we have these three, they're linked copies, let's just come to the material of the actual logo. So let's go here, let's add in a new material, let's increase a new, or let's get a new panel. Let's change that to the shader editor, N to remove that, and now just increase the metallic value down up there, and decrease the roughness by quite a bit. Yeah, all of these are pointed really, really close to each other. That's what's happening. So let's take all of these three, GZ them down a bit, then take this, grab it on the X and move it that side, grab this, move it on the X by that much. All right. And then of course decrease the power down to maybe 10 itself. Might do good. Maybe a bit lesser as well. 3. Okay. Change the color to the Ion Academy colors of turquoise. Maybe grab this to about 10 and just grab them up. Oops. Grab them up on the Z-axis by a bit. GC and just grab them up a bit. GX a bit this side. Awesome. So now in our world settings, we can have a little bit of world lighting as well. So let's just increase that by a tiny little bit. But we want the background to still be black. So change to the world over here. Shift A, add in a mix shader. And then Shift D to duplicate this. Connect this in here and change the color to black. However, for the factor, add in a light path and then hook the is camera ray into the factor. That way, if it is a camera ray, it's gonna take this particular value to be the background. But for everything else, it's getting lit by this particular value of the background. So now let's make this more metallic or give it like a little texture to it. So let's go back to the object. Since we have it selected, this is what we currently have. We had changed the roughness and stuff like that. But let's do a little bit more. So let's add in a noise texture and hit Control T with the node wrangler switched on from our preferences. Go to object, connect that to the vector, and here let's connect this to a color ramp just so that we have more control, and then connect the color of the color ramp into the roughness value. Okay, now let's take the noise texture, increase the scale a little bit, increase the black by a little bit. Let's increase the white down here, and then on the z-axis, not the z-axis, on the y-axis, let's just decrease this a bit, and there. So that gives a little bit more depth to the texture that we're using in our logo. See, so now that's what it looks like. So now let's just have a look at what we see. So awesome. We're starting off from here, and we can actually see it do that. So that looks much cooler. But there is some movement over here that I am not liking. I guess that's because the object by themselves are moving. So there's nothing much that we can do for that, I guess. If we do change it to view from our camera, maybe we can change it to UV, and that'll make sure that that doesn't happen. Okay, so the UV seems to be stretched out, but there is no movement there. That's good. So there, now we have our animation quite a bit done. Now we have to just make this a little bit more cinematic. So the first thing that we could do is switch on depth of field. So let's go ahead, take our camera, select our camera, and switch on depth of field. Under depth of field, let's see if we just change the f-stop and then change the focus distance till we get this very, very sharp. We don't want to focus on the object so that right at the start when we start, it'll still be out of focus. So let's actually see. So I think this is the best in focus. So it's about 13 meters. Which we also could have seen just by looking at the value over here. So it's 13.438. So 13 meters would do this because this itself has some thickness as well. So that 0.4 thickness is why 13 looks really good. So now that's one way of focusing it. So now when we actually go down here, it's going to be all completely blurred out. So I guess that could be one type of an effect if you dig that, where it goes from like something that's completely blurred, you get it into focus. That's something that some people might like. Or if you don't want that and you want it to stay focused, then you could simply change the focus object. You could click here and change the focus object to the text. If you do that, it'll stay focused on the text at all points of time. So in fact, just to show you, what I'll do is I will take this particular camera, I will Shift D, and now I have another camera. This camera 1, I will have the focus object on the text. Okay. So now if I was to go to view cameras, set active object as camera, then you can actually take a look at how it would look if the focus object was set to this. So even right at the front, it's still a little blurred because the object by itself is pretty thick and we have the f-stop value at 0.1. You could just increase the f-stop value a bit and now it'll look far better for whatever you feel like. But we're going to keep this as our main camera, where we don't focus and it comes into focus eventually, because I feel like that feels more cinematic and suits what I want. So now let's add in some particles so that the actual depth of field can be noticed even more and you get a nice bokeh effect. So let's first create the particle that we want. We want UV sphere. Let's just scale that down a bit, G on the X so that we move it out of the way. We go to object and we make sure that it is on shade smooth. Now we have to give this some sort of material. So let's select like 3 different colors that we want for the different particles. How we do that is we add in a color ramp. We're going to connect that up to the emission color. And then we're going to change this from linear to constant. And then we're just going to select our 3 different colors that we want. So maybe one particle could be our nice blue itself. The other ones could be maybe a nice grayish color. Then we could have one that's slightly on the darker side of the blue. Maybe you can add a little bit more of another color, which is on the slightly greener side of things. All right, so this could be our different colors. So that looks good enough. Now we go to object info. We add in the object info node and we select random and place that into the factor. So now we can make the emission strength as well, maybe like 5. Okay, so now we have to distribute this particle around this particular place. So how we can do that is by adding in a new cube. Let's scale up the cube. Let's see how it looks over here. Let's just scale it up a bit more, then scale it on the x-axis till we get it there. And now let's add in a new particle system. So also go to render as object, and then select our sphere. And also let's not show the emitter. So yeah, now these are all of our particles, which are very much out of focus, but there are way too many particles. So let's go up. Let's change the number of particles down to 200. Okay, let's change the velocity from 1 to 0.2. Let's randomize this by just 0.1. All right, so the end frame, let's not have that at 200. It's just stopping there. So let's go on to like 250. Let's increase the number to 300 because of that. Let's increase the lifetime as well to maybe 60. Let's change the lifetime randomness to 1. Now let's have a look at what it looks like. Okay, I think this is better. We have a lot more stuff happening around. We have our there in studios. Now to deal with the final lighting, just to make this even more cinematic than it already is. So we're gonna add in maybe a spotlight. Okay, let's rotate it on the y-axis by a bit, and then rotate it on the x-axis by a bit, and then let's just grab it up. Okay, let's just rotate it a bit more. Okay, grab it, move it up right about there. Let's go to the settings and change the size, maybe reduce the size a bit. Now in our world properties, we've added in only the surface, but let's give it some volume. So Shift A, principled volume. Let's select that, plug that in, change the density to maybe 0.1, change the color very dark. Okay, there you go. Maybe a bit darker as well. Now let's select this particular spotlight and increase the power to maybe 10 megawatts or maybe 5 megawatts. Okay, no. So 0.5 megawatts, yeah, that looks much better. Change the color, to our Diane Studio colors, rotate it just like that. Maybe rotate it in like that, but change specular down, diffuse down. Maybe I just have a very little amount of diffuse, a very, very little amount of specular, so maybe 0.001. Okay, so that does it as well, maybe 0.01. Yeah, 0.01. Awesome. So that gives us this nice spotlight as well on the diamond. Let's increase the blend to 1. So yeah, there we go. Now we have something that comes into focus. We always have a nice background gradient right from the start. And then we have our light, we have the AI Studio up here. We have the light go right past it. All right. A lot of this will look much better in the render. You can't quite tell in these previews, but yeah, I think that should do. All right, so that gives us exactly what we want. So pretty cinematic intro. We could make it a lot more complicated, but I think this much should do for now. So the last thing that you have to do is make sure you select the right output file, change from PNG to whatever you want. This time maybe I'll render it out as FFmpeg video, change the encoding to MPEG-4. All you have to do is render animation. Thank you for watching this particular episode. I hope you learned something. We will make much more complex and much better animations as well, and try to make it simple step by step really, really soon. So stay tuned. Make sure you like, and if you actually enjoyed this, subscribe, comment down what you want to see, and we will definitely get to it. Thank you so much for watching. Stay creative.